we're taking it all in. It's all grist for the mill. And yet it's sort of, to a certain extent, it's an invasion of privacy. But we can't help it. I'm listening to that guy on his phone in the supermarket line thinking, is he talking about killing his wife? Is that what's going on here? Or so there's, I mean, it's just the way, I think it's the way we're wired, because we always look at things in terms of story. Where does this story go, and how does this story end? I mean, I don't know any other way to look at the world. When something doesn't track story wise happens, I just go, well, what the hell?
Hey, I'm Alex Morrissey, and this is Tradecraft. Thanks for listening. Each episode, I discuss the creative life and process with the people responsible for the books and comics we love. Today's guest, Ron Marz, is a beloved comic book and video game writer. He built his reputation in space with titles like Silver Surfer and Green Lantern. Ron's love for genre fiction comes through in his writing. I've long admired his touch with science fiction and classic adventure stories. So much so, I even hustled to be the penciler during the tail end of his run on the Kyle Rayner Green Lantern tenure. A sign of great creative character is long-term collaborations, and Ron has his share. Another quality of character is found in the company you keep, like who's willing to go to bat for you, especially when you're starting out. And when Ron entered comics, he had his champion. It would be easy to dismiss this as favoritism. But it goes back to creative character. When someone displays the raw materials and open-minded enthusiasm needed, people will take the chance. It happened for Ron and many others. But what you do with that opportunity is entirely up to you. And what Ron did was write monthly comics for 5 years and never looked back. We hadn't met before this, but we share a bunch of mutual acquaintances, and Ron's exactly who I hoped he'd be. This is me with Ron Marz. Nice to meet you. It's kind of strange. I think you and I got into comics at Marvel within a year of each other.
And that was like 5 years ago. So
I know. I mean, and look at us. It's funny. I think the weird perceptions. I don't know for you, but like for me, there was this hyper focus on, getting in to the business. And then when you're in the business, you're really focused on getting the work done. So you're not like, you cease being this sort of comic book fan. That is what lured you into the world. All that is very complex way of saying it felt like you were already established into the game when I arrived just a year after you were there, because I'm like, oh, he's on a title book.
Well, or it was the 90s and they were hiring anybody.
Oh no, that makes me feel really special.
Well, it does have, and look, I was very fortunate to, have the entree that I did. But, and I a lot of people will say this, and getting in is not that hard. Staying in, that's the hard one. Because everybody gets their chance on the merry-go-round for a little while, because editors are constantly looking for A, somebody to do the gig, and B, like the next, the next star, the next shiny star that they can say, oh, well, I brought this person in, so you should give me a raise.
It helps in the meetings. You're the person.
You're the discoverer. But that, everybody is sexy and new for just a little while, and then it's about the work and the professionalism and the stick-to-itiveness of it. The being the new thing only gets you a couple of years, I think. 3, 4, maybe even 5 years. That you can be the new thing. You can win the best newcomer award for about 5 years from your career.
Right.
After that, there's no middle ground. There's like you're a newcomer or you're a veteran. There's nothing in between.
There's just no like fair
Yeah,
midland, just the
hanging
journeyman
around.
creator. There you go. Yeah, I mean, I think also there's a one thing that is missing between then and now, which offered that sort of entry point, were all the anthology books that were available back in the 80s and the 90s, where you had your Marvel Comics Presents or Showcase books that allowed the editors to take that swing without
Yeah,
having to lose a
take a
lot of
take a little
um,
bit of risk on the new kid. And there are, like DC
yeah.
still does those anthology books, which are essentially 100-page
Hmm.
giants because but I don't know that there's 100 pages of story, but there's still, everybody gets a 10-page story. So a lot of people get their tryout. I think what sort of went away even before I was in was the backup story in a regular time. I mean, I
Yeah.
know those. Talking with like Jam DeMattis, who obviously predated both of us in getting in the business, but he lives in my hometown. So I don't live in my hometown. He does. Apparently, there's Kingston, New York has a one comic book writer at a time rule, and when I left, he came in. So, but talking to JM, that was his entree, was doing a bunch of 5 or 7 page backups. And that was, again, the place where
Hmm.
you proved yourself, both in terms of your craft, but also the ability to just turn the stuff in on time and you can tell a somewhat satisfying story, beginning, middle, and end in 7 pages. You could probably do it at 20 or 22. um,
Sure.
which I think is
Yeah.
a great proving ground that we don't necessarily have anymore. Most everybody,
Yeah.
I think most everybody does their first work, doing an indie published book that's of regular length, or more, um, 20,
Hmm.
28 pages, 32 pages, so that working on those little short stories, which force you to hone your craft and tell a little gem rather than letting the thing sprawl, letting, as Mark Wade says, letting a helicopter crash for 8 pages. I think that's a better way to get your chops than it is than we have now, which is sort of you're on your own to a great extent. You're doing it or
Hmm.
you're self-publishing, and there's nobody to tell you no. I mean, that's a blade that cuts both ways. There's nobody to tell you no,
Yep.
and there's nobody to tell you, oh, that's wrong. We don't do that.
I was talking to I guess, a mutual acquaintance of ours, Keith Browning, and I said, I really want to see somebody ink you, because, that was how pencilers learned to get better at
Yeah.
their craft, was having a good inker kind of show them how to, omit things or add things or whatever is necessary for that reproducible artwork. And his response to me was like, I've never even had the thought that I would be inked in
Well,
comic
it's
books.
it's a in some ways it's a dying skill, and
Hmm.
certainly I think most people are not learning that way anymore. They're just doing it themselves, and they're,
Yeah.
to a great extent, they're not even doing it on paper anymore. They're doing it digitally, and that has positives and negatives to it as well. It's I was actually dialoguing a batch of Keith's pages this morning and over the weekend to finish off a book that we've been working on for a while, just taking a while to get out, mostly because it's my fault. But yeah, it's lovely stuff, and it wouldn't have occurred to me to even say, hey, let's get somebody else to ink.
Yeah. I just remember when my early works, my mentor in the time was like, hey, he would get on the phone and try to call inkers that he thought would be really good to work over me. And then, so then I could kind of walk into my editor's office and say, hey, maybe you could give so and so a call, because it was one of those, the kid needs to know something. This
Well,
is how you learn
I think
things.
to a great extent the alchemy of what this medium does is collaboration. There,
Yeah.
there are some that just do the whole thing themselves, and that's awesome. I am not one of them. I can't draw to save my life. So those people aside, I think you learn a lot by collaborating with a bunch of different people,
Hmm.
artistically or narratively. Just I know I can if I write a story and Keith Browning draws it, or my buddy Bart Sears draws it, those stories are going to come out wildly like same script, same story. They're going to come out wildly differently
Oh,
because
sure.
of what those particular artists do and how they approach things. And I think that's a learning curve for writers in general. Is that you make this story with this group of people. The same story would be a different story if you made it with a different group of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mean, it's like a cover song. You have Dylan's along the Watchtower, and then you have Hendrix's all along the Watchtower, and same song, same chord progressions, but
Yeah. Oh yeah.
wildly different, experiences, which is totally awesome. Yeah. I think, one thing I kind of question about, or not question, I think, is I really am curious the collaborative process, since we have all these digital tools to communicate with one another at all times, and wherever we are, I would think naturally like this would only improve the collaboration process with the people in the team. Is that your experience, or is it
I
something
think
different?
I think it's an individual choice. Because I was always pre pre email, pre Zoom, pre all of the stuff that connects us much more readily now. I was on the phone with the people that were drawing my stories, or seeing them in person. Or I think if you want to be a collaborator, you find a way to do that, regardless of the tools.
Yeah.
And if you don't, look, I know there are writers that write the thing, write a full script, hand it off, and that's the last they think about. To me, that's
Yeah.
frankly a shitty way to do comics. Some people just want to write it and move on. I want to, I want to be at the beginning of the process and at the end to make sure everything came together properly, and make sure that everybody along the way got what they needed to help them do the best job they possibly could do. Because ultimately, I mean, the
Hmm.
audience doesn't care that we're collaborating. The audience just wants the best book they can get their hands on. And I think collaboration is the way we do that, but it's all behind the curtain. It's nothing that the audience ever sees.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's totally fair. I guess letters columns might be the only opportunity for that discussion to happen in the pre
Yeah, I mean,
digital
it
age.
was a conversation. It just took months.
Right. No, it did. Yeah, you're right. Totally did. I guess like I mean, you got into the business, and I mean, I think you got into business in a not too unfamiliar story. Somebody was in the business, somebody thought you had some promise and held your hand and said, go in, or brought
Yeah.
you in, or told you to speak to somebody. That happened to me as well. And it was not an intentional thing. It was just paths crossing 5 years apart. It was great, because but also unexpected. I really I was like, oh, okay, this is happening. There's been a fair amount of conversation, I guess, recently with people I talk with about mentorship and the value of that, and how important it is for the fostering and development of talent within the industry, rather than the sort of protecting of the secret
Yeah.
and secret skill system that we all possess to one degree or another. On a value scale of 1 to 10 for you and confidence boosting level, having a mentor, was that really
Oh
high
no, it
for
was
you or
the
low?
scale of 1 to 10. It was a 26. It's
Right. Okay.
I say that yeah, it was hugely important because it's the entree, it's your foot in the door. Whenever I give like workshops or something like that, I always say Jim Starlin said, "Hey, do you want to write comics?" And obviously you say yes, but it's also like, well, you want to play center field for the Yankees? Well, yeah, but you don't get to do that. You don't just get to
Sure.
do that because this other guy said. But when it's Jim Starlin and it was Marvel in the 90s, you do get to do that. you
Hmm.
get to try out. You get to have a tryout, and if you don't screw it up, they let you stick around. So obviously,
Yeah.
I didn't screw it up, and I'm still here. For good or ill, I'm still
Yeah.
here. But I also knew I could do it. Like once
Okay. Well,
Jim,
that so.
you know, once we Jim and I sat on his porch in the Catskill Mountains, New York State, and he said, "Well, here's how you break down the script." And I went, "Oh, okay, I can do that," and I could. Now,
Hmm.
at the time, I just thought, well, yeah, I can do that because everybody can do that. I mean, it's just, it's just pictures. It's just still pictures to
Hmm.
tell a story. And it took me years to figure out that not everybody can do that. That it's not a natural skill. It's just
Yeah.
something that I happen to have. I think both from just being a fan of visual storytelling, movies and TV and all that, and comics, but also just that's the way my brain was wired. Like again, when I give workshops, sometimes I talk about that the way Jim described it was a frozen moment in time, panel to panel storytelling
Hmm.
that gives the audience all the information it needs. And sometimes people's eyes just glaze over because they have no idea what I'm talking about. And I initially
Yeah.
thought, well, I'm not explaining it right. And then I realized I'm actually explaining it right. Like some people just are not wired to do that. Like they can't
Yeah.
visualize it because that's how their brain works. But my brain worked that I could just sit down and do it. It probably has a lot to do with taking
Yeah.
film classes in college. And I mean, frankly, I was straight out of college at this point. I was like 22.
Hmm.
So I could do it. So I wasn't surprised that I could do it. And I just when I got my stuff, the first script I ever wrote was printed by Marvel and went in just like I wrote it. And I was just like, oh, well, that's how that works. That's cool. Now,
Yeah.
you realize you hear other people's stories and you realize that I pulled the arm on the slot machine and I like got all the coins out the first time. I was fortunate that was my journey through this is to just, oh, here's a
Hmm.
chance. I didn't screw it up, and then I've been doing it ever since. I mean, which sounds
Yeah.
shockingly simple, and it's also fairly disgusting for people who are trying to break in, and they just say, "Oh, well, they open the door for you and just let you in." I'm like, well, yeah, I'm pleased, but you can't be
But
embarrassed about how you
no.
got in.
No, but but it wasn't it, but it's not just that. I mean, I mean, you had a good person vouching for you. But the point being is that he would have done that if he didn't think that there was a chance that you couldn't do it.
Right.
If he was like this kid is charming, clever bastard, just doesn't have it. Like every time I talk to him, like he just wants to know about when I wrote some comic book in the 70s and doesn't really want to like talk about other things or story constructs or whatever the discussion points you two had. That was enough for him to say, hey, I think this person could
Yeah. Well,
do the work.
and obviously, I'm forever grateful. I mean, I'm not here if uh, I'm not darkening your doorstep today if I didn't meet Bernie Wrightson and Jim Starlin and have Jim say, "Why don't you help me out with this thing and see
Hmm.
see what you think?" And it was great.
Yeah.
Obviously, but it was what I could do it, and I always knew I was going to be a writer because I didn't have any other skills, frankly, or interest in a lot of other things. It's not like I was like, oh, whether I want to be a plumber, a writer, or a fireman. Like there was no other, there was no other path. It was a writer of some sort, and this happened to be the road that I went down, and frankly, I would still like to do more prose work because that was kind of the original intent when I was 16 years old.
Yeah.
But this comes up and you roll with it and consider yourself lucky. Consider yourself like you won the lottery.
For sure. And there was a conscious effort in me. Like I knew I wanted to do comic books and I loved comic books. I mean, there's no denying that when I was growing up. But I also knew that there were people making these comic books and they showed up every month, which meant there was work there. Like this was a job. This wasn't just make a painting and hope somebody buys a painting. This was a very much a commercial enterprise. So I think that's what allowed me to kind of continue on that path for it, because I knew that there was something there
Yeah,
in
I
the
mean,
end.
thankfully, I had the mentors that I had, and I frankly didn't even consider them mentors at that point. They were just my buddies, like all of
Hmm.
Jim,
Right.
Bernie, Terry Austin, Fred Hembeck, Joe Staten, just people I hung around with. But I was getting an education, it, and I, to a certain extent, I knew it, and also to a certain extent, I didn't know it. Like I was just like just seeing what their lives were like and what the flow of work was and how you had to, you didn't sit around and wait for the muse to strike. You sat down and did your job. Because if you
Hmm.
didn't, somebody else would be more than willing to do that for you. Um, Somebody would
Yeah.
be
No, the
very
line is
happy
very
to,
long.
and now it's now it's even more of a wide open market, in that if you're not going to do the thing that they hired you to do, there's a line of 100 people. Uh, yeah, around,
Around the
yes, very
world.
much around the world. I mean,
I
it's
mean,
particularly artistically.
yeah,
There's the the
sure.
digital. I think that people look at the digital revolution in comics as the thing that, oh well, inkers are no longer here, and we do stuff a lot faster and blah blah blah. I think the real digital revolution impact is that it doesn't matter where you are, you can be doing work in American comics. Brazil,
Hmm.
Argentina, South Africa, Italy, Spain, it doesn't matter. You can do the
Right.
job, and certainly when I broke in, if you were within reasonable distance of a FedEx drop, you could do the job. But if you were in New York City or in proximity to New York City, you had a lot better chance of doing this job because you could just go to the office.
Yeah, for sure. It was quite a bonus. I guess, well, like, what was your on ramp for? You said that you were interested in prose and you were curious about doing more. I mean, were books your on ramp
Yeah,
with
I mean,
writing? I
just
mean, were you just,
I was a reader from a very young age.
yeah,
All the stuff that boys are supposed to read. Robert E. Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs and Tolkien and a lot of that, heroic adventure, heroic fantasy kind of stuff. Plus comics and
mhm,
Savage Sort of Conan, all that stuff. So it was all that stuff. It was all the stuff that 12-year-old boys are supposed to be up to their elbows in, and I was,
yeah,
and I guess I never grew out of it. Because it's still the
yeah.
sort of stuff I'm doing now.
I repeat it often. I have this, what I call the theory of 12, that what we love up to the age of 12 becomes just part of who we are for the rest of our lives. And we chase this
Oh
experience
yeah,
that we had of all these things in our lives, and I think that's why we see such a huge response now, over the past decade and a half, with this
yeah,
nostalgia world that we live in, with film and television and other mediums. I think the other aspect is, I've noticed through your body of work, is that every time you get a project that's outside of like the big two or somebody else's IP, you're going genre. Like I see you just dive right into tons of genre work, which I'm like, well, that explains like the literary history, explains the desire to tell stories that are, rolled up sleeves and, torn khakis, working your way through a jungle or whatever the storyline is. Like that's where I see a lot of your stories kind of emerge
yeah.
from
I mean,
in that
I
heart.
I like I like stories where something happens. If you're going to
Yeah.
write and it's perfectly fine to write a comic or a novel or whatever it is where people are mostly sitting around and talking. That's cool, just not for me. It is
Mhm.
not. It is not the flavor on the buffet table that I show up for. In general, I'm going to write a story that I want to read because I'm the
Mhm.
only audience that I'm certain of the tastes of that particular audience. So I write for me. When you work with
Yeah.
somebody else's IP, there's a parameter that you have to work with. you're given some instructions as to what you can do or how far you can go, which is fine. You're playing with somebody else's toys and you need to understand that going in. But in general, I just want something cool to happen. And
Yeah.
to me, something cool means something visual. Whatever, if it's comics or a novel or a filmed project, something cool. Give me something that's gonna leave an imprint on my eyeballs, one way or the other. And again, that's not to say that people sitting on a couch in a living room having a deep discussion for 20 pages is unworthy. It's just not for me. It's not what I do.
Right.
And I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why we have choices. Those books are just as valid and fun for the people who enjoy them.
Oh yeah,
that's cool.
Look,
Action
it would
also
be very boring if we all like the same stuff. And I'm frankly, I walk into the comic shop and I look around and there's a lot of stuff that's not for me, and I feel like, oh, good, like because it shouldn't be all for me.
Yeah.
For many years in this business, the vast majority of stuff in a comic shop was for dudes like us, and that's not necessarily a healthy business.
No, it's an unhealthy
you're
business.
ignoring a great many people who would be really, really thrilled to be able to engage with something, but there's nothing for them there. And obviously, that's changed a great deal in the last certainly 10 years and probably 15 years as we've grown up a lot in terms of the offerings that are there and the people that are making those offerings. So I think that's all great, but I still do what I do because like I said, I write for me.
Yeah. Let me just ask the point of view. So like whomever might be early on in their career as a comic book writer, stepping into the role of being the writer for Silver Surfer, which is not that it was the X-Men or Spider-Man, it's an incredibly well-known character. What did you feel like as the expectations were put upon you, and how far out were you thinking as, once you were kind of given the reins to start writing this book?
I was just excited. I mean, cool, monthly book, monthly income.
Yeah.
And which meant that I could quit my job at the newspaper, which I actually held on to for a little while just because I could do both of them. Not that big a deal, but I was the entertainment editor at the local newspaper, again at 22 or whatever I was, which was a good gig as well. But then, honestly, once the royalties started to roll in those were the days.
We lived off of those things. We lived with
those were the days where
amazing.
Your page rate check just sat on the counter uncashed for weeks or months because it was a small and tawdry thing compared to the royalty checks, which was which was awesome. When I took over Surfer, it was selling about 300,000 copies a month, sometimes twice a month. Mind-boggling, right? By today's standards, absolutely
totally mind-boggling,
incredibly mind-boggling. But that's just what the business was back then. But thankfully, I had my mentors again that were my friends. I didn't think of them as mentors. I had them telling me, this isn't going to last. This is, the history of comics is boom and bust. It's waves and troughs, and this won't always be this way. You won't always be getting a fat royalty check every month off the issue that you wrote. So tuck that money away and be responsible with it, and because it's at some point the bottom will fall out. And sure enough, it did.
Like 7 years later,
not even. By the time I did Marvel versus DC, that was a response to the bottom falling out because Marvel and DC had a vested interest in keeping comic shops open so that they had a place to sell their product. So that's what, that's what spurred that. So, and I just, it was comfortable. I started writing the book, and Jim was off doing Infinity Gauntlet, which I guess worked out pretty well for him. And, so I was telling these Surfer stories that sort of took place between the cracks of Infinity Gauntlet chapters. And I just felt like, oh, well, I can do this. This is, this is cool. And I still, it's weird when people bring up those books at conventions, which happens fairly often. That first year of Surfer that I did, people bring them up on a regular basis, and say, oh, this was my favorite book, or this is the book that pulled me into comics. And I always feel like, well, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, it was like on the job
Right.
training for me, which was, in retrospect, it was awesome. It was great on the job
Yeah.
training to like work in a shared universe because of those types of stories that I was in position to tell. But I learned it, and I would usually deflect that. People would come up and say, oh, I love these stories, and I would just say, I didn't know what the hell I was just making it.
Right.
And I was actually in Lucca, Italy, at the show there, and I was with a friend, and somebody came up, like on the street, just came up to me and said, an Italian fan, and said, they love those issues and blah blah. And I did the deflection thing and said, I didn't know what I was doing, blah blah. And after that person walked away, I signed their books. After that person walked away, my friend said, "What the hell's wrong with you? Like, why,
Mm. Yeah.
just say." But I'm like, that's the truth. I was figuring it out as I went. And he's like, the person that those books mean a lot to doesn't need to hear that. They just need to hear that you
Right.
enjoyed doing it and you're glad that they like it. So don't deflect.
Hmm.
Just say thank you. And that was a lesson for me that took 20 years in the business to learn. That
Hmm.
you think you're sharing your experience working on this stuff, and that they're not really that interested in your experience. They're interested in having your stamp on their experience. And so that
Yeah.
was a moment of revelation to me, and I've never forgotten it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great lesson to learn because I think when we make things, we we don't want to take a look at them because we tend to look at all
Sure.
the mistakes. Oh, I could have done this better. I can make that better. Boy, if I could rewrite that, I could make it so much better or draw it again. That's not their perspective. And to do, and I've done what you're talking about. What I learned was I'm denying
Yeah.
them their experience. Like their experience is to be, this was such a fun thing. I'm so happy you did it. And you're thinking like, boy, man, like that's just a rookie mistake after rookie mistake. And
Yeah. They
that's
don't
not
they don't
them.
they don't need to hear it. It's not that they're I
Right.
I think and I never had anybody go, well, why are you telling me this, asshole? Um, you know,
Well, because
everybody's very
yeah.
polite. They like that they're being engaged, but it it took me a while to realize, oh, that's not really what we're here for. Um, we're here to,
No, right. You have a good
yeah,
friend who
yeah.
told you. Yeah. Who I'm racking my brain. Who was editing Surfer
Was
when you got on?
Craig
Was it
Anderson, son of the creator
okay?
of Marmaduke,
There you go.
which it took me a little
That's a
while to
legend
find
to live
that
up
out,
to.
but
That's well, I mean, listen, that is comics royalty to one degree or another. I loved Marmaduke as
I
a kid.
I had honestly
It's
never read
great.
it as a kid because my local newspaper didn't carry it, and um,
Oh
so
no.
Craig's dad, created Marmaduke and did the strip for years, and I went, huh, okay, that's like having no. I mean, I knew what it was, but I had never read it. But
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, he obviously trusted Jim when Jim said, "Turn the book over to this
Hmm.
guy." Craig went, "Yeah, okay, we'll try it," and I'm sure with some arm twisting on Jim's part, and maybe some, well, if he screws the whole thing up, I'll come back and fix it. I assume that was a
Right.
discussion you know, that I was not privy to. But Craig was great and treated me like, taught me things, but also treated me like an equal and a professional, which I think helped build the
Hmm.
confidence. I was confident I could do it, but you're also a 22-year-old kid, swimming in those waters. It's an intimidating thing to go up to um the Marvel offices and be meeting the editors and other freelancers who are up there, and it was it was still kind of a not a frat house at that point, but it had a very clubby sort of atmosphere to it.
Oh, yeah.
And if you were the new guy, you felt a little, you felt a little awkward. You felt like you didn't quite belong,
Mhm.
but fairly, if you hung around and you were social and all that, you eventually became one of the guys that was in that group, one of the people in that group. And I still remember the people who went out of their way to make me feel welcome, and the people who just would sort of ignore you in the hall. For a crisp $20 bill, I will give you those names.
Right. I also I had that same sensation, but I also, like, it took me years. I'm like, "You know what? Like, if there were if I had a snapshot of what I looked like walking up and down those hallways, they were probably like, I don't know what to make of this idiot, and I'm just gonna, like, not like, I'll just carry on with my business." So, and, like, one guy had a sport coat on, so that was intimidating. I was like, "That guy's wearing a sport coat, so he must be really smart, professional, or buttoned up, and not exactly,
Yeah, well, I
hanging out
also
with me."
realized in not too long that everybody was up there doing their job. Like there was it was
Yeah.
social and all that, but there was also work to get done. And
Mhm.
if you could be a help in getting that work done, they would they would be they would be thankful. They would appreciate it. So if sometimes you were, I'd walk into Craig's office and he would say, oh, you gotta, do you have any ideas for what if? Because he also edited What If. I think he edited Silver Surfer, Silver Sable, Guardians of the Galaxy, um, other stuff, but also What If. And What If was a huge pain in the ass editorially because it was a different story every month. And if I'm being
Mhm.
completely honest, I didn't care about What If. It was dumb to me. It was like, oh, you mean an imaginary story based on a different imaginary story? Well, that's kind of dumb. But it was work, and you also felt like you were doing a solid for the editor, because he needed to keep that churn going. He needed to have
Mhm.
a new team doing a new issue with either one or two new stories in it every month, and it was
Yeah.
just
I'd never even thought about that, how much of a pain in the ass
oh
that
yeah,
that
it was
title would
because
have
it was
been.
just the churn,
Uh-huh.
and you were kind of coming to the rescue if you were there to do it. And so I ended up doing
Yeah.
probably 7 or 8 issues, and just most of it just are
Yeah.
in an omnibus that just came out, and they sent me a big, the UPS man staggers up to the door carrying it. And so it was work. I enjoyed doing it because it was comics, but it was also like I don't know that anybody breaks into the business and goes, "Oh god, if I could only work on What If." Um, Yet,
Right, right.
anytime I do a signing or I'm at a show, there is always at least one dude who shows up with all of my What If issues to get them signed, because there are
Amazing.
guys out there who
Hmm.
just love What If. Who just like
Yeah.
that's their thing,
Yeah.
and more power to them. Just if man, if you really wanted that story of what if the Silver Surfer got the Infinity Gauntlet rather than Thanos, I got you covered, man. You're good.
Right. Well, it's the ultimate who would win in a fight,
Yeah,
the character X and character Y. And that's what if is just take that
yeah.
and
Well,
run it crazy with
it's
it.
also very inside baseball, which is obviously something superhero titles
Mm.
depend on. Is you sort of have to know the original
Mhm.
story to know why the one we're doing is different, and it is of interest.
Right.
Why what if Ghost Rider's sister, got to be Ghost Rider instead of him. You have
Right.
to come with all of that previous knowledge to even care about the story. Um,
Yes. Yeah, which is, what I often say about comic book writing, especially for companies like Marvel and DC. The writer's job is also to be a bit of an archaeologist. I mean, you have to go in and hunt for these moments and these offshoot possibilities of stories that you can say, "Oh, you know what? Like, if what if I did this with this Like they never resolved this one little bit in this storyline. We could resolve it in a run here. And there's your,
Um,
there's your solution for
there is
3 or 4
certainly that.
issues.
And
Yeah.
God help me if I don't try to do that at all, because it's just, I am not a fan of stories that are based on other stories. I'm a fan of stories that are
Hmm.
that need to be told. And again, that's not judgmental at all. That's just, it doesn't appeal to me. So the stuff that's real
Right.
continuity driven, and this story takes place between, panels 3 and 4 of page 17 of Avengers 215. Like,
Hmm.
I don't care. It does not,
Right.
that's not the way I'm wired. Um, but I know there are writers who are, and there are fans that are,
Yeah,
and
sure.
we should do that stuff for them. Knock yourself out.
Hmm.
But it was
Yeah.
never like diving through, a stack of issues to find, like what untold story I need to mine. Was never how I approached the job.
Yeah.
And early on in Surfer stuff, like once in a while, Craig would say, "Hey, can you bring like Captain Reptile was like Craig was big on Captain Reptile, who was basically like a space dinosaur. Like he was, it's like a raptor in a space suit. He's dumb." And he's like,
Okay.
"Can when you really need to tie off Captain Reptile's story, can you take an issue and do that?" And I was like, "Do we really? Is that
Do we?
the thing that people are clamoring for?" But that, so Craig, that's what he wanted, and all right, well, again, a lesson
Okay.
in
Sure.
getting along, or going along to get along, and doing the
Yep.
job that's in front of you, uh, in a shared universe. All right, I guess I'm going to write Captain Reptile. Uh, so I told that story, and then,
Yeah.
at least as far as I know, Captain Reptile never appeared again.
So I guess congratulations on
Yeah, I mean,
doing a bang up
obviously,
job.
obviously, I told the ultimate Captain Reptile story, and everybody went, "Well, no way to top that." So,
There
no
you
way to top
go.
that dinosaur in a spacesuit story. Let's move on.
How does your story collection like your I guess your idea morgue, like how do you capture things and hold on to stuff? Do you, like for me, like I will write down premise after premise when they come to me. I'm like, oh, I got and I'm like, I'll type it down, write it down, whatever, however I want to. And then every so often, the right character for one of these premises comes strolling into my head, and I was like, "Oh, there's a cool story. That could be a book." And that's fantastic. But in comics, you have a timeline. These things have to come out every month. So,
It's,
what's your
you
technique?
see stuff. Obviously, you have to consume in order to put it back
Mhm.
out. You gotta, and whether that's, and hopefully, it's it's novels, it's comics, it's film, it's TV, it's everything. It's just taking a walk in the woods.
Yeah,
It's you know NP, yeah,
traveling.
exactly. It's NPR, word pieces. And stuff just it's all out there, and you find the ones that are
Yep.
appealing to you, and you sort of pluck them out of the air. And I find that the ones so I pluck them out of the air and I write them down, and there's a file in the laptop. But I find that the ones that are good ideas, they don't leave your head. They're in there for the most part.
Mhm.
There's some
Yeah.
other stuff that you write down and you go, well, that's a cool one, and you just never get back to it because it's probably not that fertile. But I've had plenty of things that you hear something, and 15 years later you go, "Oh, I know where that fits."
Mhm.
I did a serial in, heavy metal called Swamp God, which was set in the Civil War, and it was about a contingent of Confederate soldiers and a contingent of Black Union soldiers. And that came from two different sources, where I had read some stories of Union soldiers who were sent into the South to just wreak havoc, burn crops,
Mm.
and so that those guys were sort of, they were off the reservation, so to speak. They were out there doing
Yeah.
wreaking havoc in what ways they wanted to. And then the other part of it was reading an article about a battle that actually took place after the Civil War peace was signed in Appomattox between Union and Confederate soldiers, I believe in Texas, where they actually were, there was a battle and guys got killed, but the peace had been signed. They just didn't know about it because how are you going to get word to them? So those guys, those guys ended up killing each other for no good reason. So all of that ended up distilled into a story that was Black Union soldiers and Confederate soldiers in the Louisiana Bayou. And you find out at the end of the story that the war's over. These guys are, have been after each other to kill each other. The war's actually over. But because I am who I am, there's a swamp monster in the story that gets called up by a swamp witch that the Confederates are associated with, and the monster gets loose. The monster is going to kill everybody. So the Union soldiers and the Confederate soldiers have to put aside their animosity for each other and try to survive together rather than trying to kill each other and having this monster out there. Ultimately it's a story about a giant swamp monster, but it came from actual historical stuff that I just stumbled across, and it percolated around in there and came out that way.
Yeah. I think that you touch on the thing, that input factor. And I think it's so it is so crucial, especially for writers. I also think it's important for artists. It may not be the matter of reading novels so much for an artist. It's going to museums, it's watching film, it's whatever the world is. And once again, traveling. Everybody travel as much as you can. What are your rituals with your input? I mean, what are you actively going after to broaden your
I don't know that
hopper?
I go after anything in particular. I just end up reading what appeals to me and seeing what appeals to me. And, sometimes I don't ever go into it thinking, all right, what can I get out of this so that I can apply it to what I do? I don't think that way. Inevitably something comes out of it that percolates into your brain and rolls around there and then comes back out years later as something different. I think a lot of it is just having experiences, whether it's taking in someone else's creative vision, or, as you said, traveling. There are plenty of stories that come directly from me being able to go to New Zealand or India or South Africa on convention trips, which is insane. I mean, it's nuts that I get to go to these places because I make up stories. But all of that, when you get taken out of your comfort zone and get thrust into another culture, I think it's the best thing in the world for your creativity.
Yeah. No, it's that sort of experience of space that, like you said, outside of your comfort zone of space, and being forced to engage with other people, because these cultures and behaviors are so, alien in a way to us, yet also so very human. And so when you're writing things, you're able to add humanity to characters that aren't humans, that's air quotes, in a story, because we can only understand things through a human point of view. Like we can't, no writer is good enough to write something that's entirely alien because we have no context. If they could, we couldn't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a silver alien flying on a spaceport, but it's still a human story.
Sure.
I mean, it's still, it comes, the universal human experience is what informs all of it. And I think the thing that you get out of travel in particular, I think the job of a storyteller is empathy. I feel like your job as a storyteller is to find empathy with your characters, the good ones and the bad ones. Like, you have to understand why they're doing what they're doing, or it doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem like you're fleshing out real characters for the audience to experience if they don't seem real to you. So I feel like going to India or going to Kenya, where you are dealing with a very different society, a very different culture than growing up in the US, is hugely beneficial because it forces you to empathize with a culture that you've really got no idea. Before you go there and
Hmm.
you're immersed in it, you sort of have a sense, right? Seen seen those cultures, in TV or movies or documentaries or whatever. But until you're in the middle of the street in Bengaluru, India, and the traffic is all around you, and there, life is
Yeah.
happening to hundreds of people that are within the scope of your view, and every one of them has a story, and every one of them has a story that's as worthy as anybody else's. That forces you to, I mean, it forces you to empathize, and I think it also forces you to deal with the fact that every character in something that you write has that rich a backstory. Maybe we don't see it, and maybe it's not
Yeah.
not even referenced. But everybody that you depict in one of your stories should feel like that they have that life. That when they walk out of panel in the comic, their life story continues, and it would be just as interesting to tell that as the one that you're telling.
Yeah, I think it's our responsibility as the dreaded word storyteller, as the storytellers to to move as far, not far, I guess, to remove as much of the trappings of obvious goodness or badness that we see that were in the earliest forms of, let's say, cinema. You have a person with a uh, you know a handlebar mustache twirling it as they tie somebody to the tracks. Like, this is our indicator, this is our graphic sign saying bad person. And then, so, like, okay, so this is the villain. There's no motivations behind this. This is just bad behavior. We have to give them as much of a reason to behave the way they do for the reader to get that, as you said, the empathy to go, all right, I don't agree with you tying somebody to the rails here, but I do understand why you feel that you're in this
Yeah,
position.
how did we get here? I mean, that's the short version. Is
Right.
what and it to empathize with a character doesn't mean you agree with that character. I think
Hmm.
empathizing and sympathizing are two different things. To understand where
Yeah.
that character is coming from is one thing. You don't have to accept. I mean, like I see all the psychological flaws of why dudes join ICE, right? Like I don't agree with any
Yeah.
of it, and it's a terrible thing that's going on. But you can look at
Hmm.
those dudes cowering behind their masks and know exactly who they are,
For
because in
sure.
some ways they're all cliches, right? Just because
Hmm.
cliche doesn't mean untrue. So so you
Oh,
can
for sure.
you can write that character and empathize with that character, but not sympathize with that character because what they're doing is reprehensible.
Yeah, we could talk about that for quite a while. But we can travel without going anywhere in life physically. Just open your eyes and your heart and see what's happening around you and put that into into your processor to
Oh, sure.
pull it out at the right
To
time.
me, you learn uh, you learn just as much standing in the supermarket line, listening to the
Hmm.
conversations around you, or sitting in a coffee shop and listening to what is happening. I mean, storytellers are the worst eavesdroppers. You know,
We're all
yeah,
really
oh yeah.
rude in
I
that
mean,
respect.
we're taking it all in. It's all grist for the mill, and yet it's sort of to a
Yeah.
certain extent it's an invasion of privacy, but we can't help it. I'm listening to that guy on his phone in the supermarket line thinking,
Hmm.
is he talking about killing his wife? Is that what's going on here? Or so there's I mean, it's just the way I think it's the way we're wired because we're always,
Yeah.
we always look at things in terms of story. How does this story where does this story go and how does this story
Right.
yeah.
Where does it play out? Yeah.
And I think that's a big I mean, I don't know any other way to look at the world
Hmm.
So when something doesn't that doesn't track story wise happens, I just go, well, what the hell? Like, how can that
Yeah.
person go unpunished this long? Because my story sense dictates that you ultimately, in some way or another, you pay for your sins.
Yeah. So how do you keep yourself neither one of us are those 20 early 20 somethings anymore when it comes to sitting down at the table to do the thing. How do you keep yourself active, alert, charged, ready to do the thing, or are we just
Oh,
living
I
on
don't.
muscle
I
memory?
think you have to. I think you have to prime the pump. Go do things.
Yeah.
Go have experiences. Go. Go. Don't sit and don't sit and look at the same four walls, because that's to me the death of creativity. If you're just experiencing the same
Hmm.
thing over and over. So I travel. I do as much stuff as I can, whether it's here, whether it's seeing shows, going to the movies, going on hikes, just trying to be one active, because this business is not terribly kind health wise to many of our
No.
brethren. So that's part of the that's part of the calculation is go to the gym, go golfing, go play softball, go do something. For God's sakes, get your ass out of that chair. But also, I think just when you go do that stuff and you sort of get the endorphins rocking and rolling, and you when you
Hmm.
get back to the desk and to the chair, you're ready. You're kind of primed to go. If I go, I was in Tucson last weekend for a show, but also went to the Air Museum, went to the national park where the giant cactuses are. Went to a cavern,
Oh,
went to a
cool.
distillery. But I went and did stuff. By the time I got back to the
Yeah.
desk, when I got back from the trip, I'm ready to go, because I hadn't actually written anything in 4 days. Uh, the mind is
Hmm.
constantly
Yeah.
working, and even on the flight, your brain's kind of working stuff out. Um, but to be removed from it and then sit back down and do it again, I feel like is a gift. Like I get to do this.
Yeah.
I get to make stuff up, and eventually it gets out there, and somebody actually pays you to do it. It's still pinch me stuff.
Yeah. No, I get that. So you have another creative writing life in with the video game industry, and I'm really kind of curious about that. I had a close buddy in New York who wasn't in the comic industry. We met each other through the embarrassing ways of we were both LARPing at the time. Like so we just met each other in that route. One day he was like, "I want to get into video games." And I'm like, "What? What?" Like because this is Manhattan. Like nobody's doing video game business there, and he put together a proposal of some sort about himself, some story ideas, and then next thing you know, the guy moves off to Los Angeles and gets a job with Acclaim, I think it was back then, and then just went from company to company. Now he's like the senior, creative overlord for some video game company. I mean, just it's nuts. But I mean, he was a manager in an apartment building. That's what he did. That paid his bills
Well, he traded up for sure. Yeah,
for
I,
sure.
I mean it's a different type of writing, but it's also the same thing. I mean, ultimately, it's the same. It's
Mhm.
you're trying to tell a story about a character that you want the audience to, if not identify with, to at least be interested in, and want to understand what happens next. So the tools you use are different, and the stories you tell are different sometimes, but the job itself is ultimately about getting some sort of emotional connection and reaction out of the audience. It's frankly a little harder in video games because you are not the complete god of that world, because the player makes choices.
Mm.
Like in comics, I make all the choices. I and the creative
Right.
team make the choices, so you get what you get. In video game, the player has agency to do this thing or that thing, to go on this quest or not go on it. So you are your sort of your storytelling partner is the player, and that kind of happens in real time. But you can, all you can do is sort of lay out everything that goes with it, and then the player picks and chooses what they want to do. And sometimes it's all of it, and sometimes it's very little of it, depending on how they engage with the game. So
Mhm.
it's cool, and it's satisfying, and frankly, the unvarnished truth is the video game industry treats its creatives better than the comic industry does, for sure. And
Okay.
that has to do with scale of economy and all that stuff. There's
Mhm.
there's a lot more money to be
Yeah.
made in video games than publishing comics, uh, until you start to take into account the IP factory aspect of comics, and the fact that we would have none of this, and if it wasn't for Stan and Jack just making up a bunch of stuff. So, but the video game stuff is different, but it's the same. The goal of the job is still the same. You just have different aspects, and I think the other thing that I find is, when you do a comic, you're working with like 4 or 5 other people. That's it. You go and do your
Yeah.
thing, and you're working on a AAA video game, and it's you and 500 other people, many of whom you don't even interact with, many of whom you do interact with too. It's a very much a group project, and I
Mhm.
honestly still not entirely sure how it all comes together. Just like everybody does their thing, and then you get this game at the end of it, and you're like, "Holy shit, how'd that happen?"
That's
But
amazing. Yeah.
I think just people in comics are doing comics because they love it. There are not enough
Yeah.
ancillary rewards in comics to be doing that job if you don't like it. Uh, and I think to great extent, same thing in video games. People are doing it because they love it, and this is the thing that has called to them. So I'm happy every day I'm doing either one of them, because again, at its core, it's making stuff up and getting paid for it.
Which is, I mean, that's what I guess that's what every little child does. I just don't think that there's a chance of monetary remuneration for those make believe stuff that little kids do
Yeah,
naturally.
there is an aspect of not growing up.
I think it's an important, like it. Well, it's
Yeah,
play. Do you know what I mean? Like when you, I mean, for me, when I'm writing, my mind is running at full speed, playing and coming up with all these variables of what could be happening in these
yeah,
moments, and that internal Geiger counter is pointing towards what feels the hottest, and you just keep chasing that, and hopefully you
yeah.
don't
I
run
mean,
into a
wouldn't it?
dead end.
It's essentially, wouldn't it be cool if? And but
Yeah,
we
yeah.
get
Not
yeah
what if, but
we
wouldn't it
get
be
and we
cool
get to
if?
run with it. We get to run with
Yeah,
the how about, or the what about. What about if we did this? And that's
sure.
particularly video games and comics. You have creative partners that you're working with that can make that real. I can say, oh,
Hmm.
what if, uh, what if what if they dive down and there's a treasure under the ledge? Cool, but some poor bastard's got to actually
Yeah.
draw that. That's I can come up with all that stuff, but it's somebody else's job to make it real.
I'm gonna start a bar called the Apologetic Writer because it is the truth, and it is the
Well,
truth.
it's the truth. You better be aware of it as a writer, and know when
Yeah,
you've crossed the line and you're asking a lot. Um, but also
yeah,
be aware that you better make that up somewhere. If you're asking for the charge of the light brigade on pages 2 and 3, there better be a very dark scene lit by moonlight later in the book where the artist doesn't have to draw anything other than
right.
some moonlit faces.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, there is a very strong. We all hope there's a strong quid pro quo happening in that
You hope
development
so. I
process.
think sometimes sometimes not everybody gets that. I think sometimes there are writers who don't make the leap, because I was generally friends with more artists than writers, and I was brought into the business by artists. Like I always got that
Mm-hmm.
aspect of it because I saw things from their point of view, even though I can't draw myself. So I think I try to be as artist friendly a writer as possible, and make sure that
Yeah.
I'm not one of these guys. Well, here's this thing I came up with. You figure it out. Like be able to understand that it works on the page before I ask you to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, don't call your editor and saying, "Hey, do you know artists who are really good at drawing
You
lots
know,
of people?" Because yeah,
what's a
I've got an idea.
what's the specific word for an armada? How many is that? 300,
Yeah,
400?
right. What's the
Yeah.
minimum count? So what's the work week day? I guess the work week and the work week day look like for you when it comes to your
Well,
business.
the majority of the time is Blizzard because we keep regular
Okay.
office hours, even if we're not necessarily in the office, although we are in the office, some days of the week. But because you're working with so many other people, there's a lot of meetings and there's a lot of, well, you do this and I'll do that. And, there's a lot of making sure that everybody's on the same page. So that's a good part of the day. And then the comics get written on the weekends and in the evenings, or,
Okay.
on planes, on, sometimes in the car if I can talk my wife into driving, if we're going to dinner, something like that. And I've got, 3 or 4 pages that are tickling my brain. I'll write them in the car.
I so identify so identify with that in every aspect. I've gotten up on camping trips hours before my wife and just go sit in the car and write while she's sleeping
Yeah.
till
Well,
like 7 or 8.
when it's ready to be born, you got to get it out.
Yeah, yeah. And I would prefer to be doing that than to be just wasting my time sleeping. I'm just kidding. I love sleeping. You touched on it, and then I touched on it again. I would feel incomplete if I didn't bring it up, but novel writing, is this a thing that you can foresee in a time frame for you, or is this a years to come
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
I'll do.
thing,
I
or
mean,
what?
I'm working with an artist buddy, who I should probably not name, just because we haven't really made a big deal out of this. So, working with an artist buddy who we want to do a book that is me writing prose and the artist drawing plates to go in the book. Very
Oh,
much
cool.
sort of uh, very much on the style of a classically produced illustrated book where there are color plates and maybe some black and white illustrations, and
Sure.
kind of thing that's not really done much anymore because that all of that costs
Hmm.
money and time, and publishers are generally like, well, we why don't you just write the thing and we'll leave all the art out because that's expensive. But this is a thing that we both want to do, so we're going to do it. We just had dinner
Cool.
last week. Yeah, I guess last week to sort out details, and it's just we're in the process now of kicking it around and getting throwing ideas into the pot, and then I'll sit down and come up with a structure and start to write, and the artist will start to draw, start to paint. So that's that's a thing that'll happen probably over the next year or so, and then
Hmm.
I would, there's a few of the ideas that are in the idea book. They're just like, well, I could actually do that as a novel if I wanted to. I mean, I guess my heart is in comics, because I love the way that collaboration works. But there's other stuff in there that if we don't get to doing it as a comic, I'll write it as a novel, and I fully intend to do that. But right now there's a lot of stuff on my plate. So, and
Yeah.
it's all stuff that I enjoy. It's not like I'm chasing what if stories just to occupy myself,
We have thoroughly beat
or what
up
if.
on poor What If
But yeah, what
this
if, which
day.
got turned into a TV series. So I guess what if
Right, sure. There,
has had the
who's
last
laughing
laugh.
now?
What if I was laughing at you? So yeah, I mean that's a down the pro stuff is more down the road than the next 6 months, but
Hmm.
it's definitely there. It's just a matter of of time. It's finding time. I think I counted up
Yeah.
the other day that I had 12 different, literally 12 different stories, creator own stories, like in various stages of
Mm.
being um, being worked on, being I always hate being developed because that's a very sort of bullshitty LA term, but
You didn't
yeah,
wear your sunglasses, so I
in
won't
the
criminalize you.
process of sort of getting honed or getting worked on or being drawn,
Hmm.
and I just feel like that's the fun part, is just moving these things along, and then when you get enough room in your schedule and the artist gets enough room in his or her schedule, you produce it and then figure out where it's going to go.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's part of the deal is this sort of this silent development process that happens. And you just kind of do the thing. And then there's this point where there's no other choice but to get it done and get it out there
Oh yeah,
one way or
and
the other.
and that's and there's nobody, there's look, there's plenty of stuff I'm doing that does have somebody looking over your shoulder, and not in a bad way, but just you do this thing at
Yeah.
this time for this purpose, and you turn it in, and uh it's a good gig. But the ones that you're sort of doing off to the side, that there's no adult supervision involved, those are
Hmm.
pretty great, because those are ones that I think, it's all fun, but I think those tend to be a different kind of fun than the work for hire gigs, because you're very much your own master.
Yeah. The potential future novel with illustrated plates, I guess two questions. One, what genre are you looking to
Um,
write this in?
huh. I don't want to say too much because it's all sort of in the process, but it's it's influenced by a lot of stuff that both I and the artist are fond of. Stephen King, Indiana Jones, Tintin,
Okay.
all
All
of
right.
that stuff, plus a lot of others,
Mhm.
plus a lot of bits and pieces from other, a lot of the stuff that you discover when you're 12 and sticks with you for the rest of your life. And so hopefully
There
this
you
when
go.
this thing comes out, it's the sort of thing that somebody discovers at 12 and sticks with them for the rest of their lives.
That would be great. How would you because we do both know how book publishers function. There should only be one thing of color, that would be the cover. Would you this is something you would try to crowdfund, or would you really hunt for the right publisher and that the deal that's gonna allow you to get the vision completed versus
Yeah,
the
I don't
deal?
know. We're early enough in it that I think we want to do it as we want to do it. And obviously
Nice.
those two are not mutually exclusive paths either. And you can crowdfund your thing,
Mhm.
and it's a great tool to be able to subsidize the creative work, particularly the art. The art is more expensive and more time consuming than me scribbling stuff down. So if you can crowdfund your thing and pay for the art, man, even better. That does not preclude you from taking it to a publisher and saying, uh, "You want this? It's done. It's paid for.
Yeah.
Do you want this?" I think it gives you a little bit bigger stick going into a deal, to say, "Well, we've already got it paid for. So this is what it
Yeah.
is. Take it or leave it."
Yeah. I love the idea of adventure tales with plates. NC Wyeth, we're looking at, that world of great stories that, I got my hands on those things
Oh
as
yeah, me too.
hand-me-down
Me
books. They were way on the way out when I was coming up in life. It would be great to bring those kinds of things
Yeah,
back.
I think there's a great joy in just being able to do the thing that you want to do in the way that you want to do it. And if that's if that's a comic, or if it's a prose story, if it's a if it's a throwback to the kind of books that aren't really made anymore,
Mhm.
Again,
Yep.
I think there's an audience for most all of that stuff, but you have to find it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh
Did
yeah,
you read this Gentleman of the
it's on
Road?
my shelf
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just grab, like, I'm just thinking like the closest thing that I have
No,
to grab is
great
that.
book. To my knowledge, Gary Gianni illustrations. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I met Gary years ago, and whenever he puts something out, I buy it. Or whenever I see him at a show, we get to hang out a little bit.
Hmm.
Just he is he is at once one of the great American illustrators, and also looks just like Abraham Lincoln. So yeah, pretty
Win-win.
good.
All right, Ron. I know you have a very important appointment,
I
so we
do.
need to get you
I gotta go
there.
play softball. Speaking of
Yeah.
endorphins and stuff.
Getting
Of
out.
course, if I take a line drive in the teeth, maybe not such a great idea, but so far I've been able to avoid that.
Touch wood. Thanks for taking the time and joining me and
My pleasure.
sharing.
This wasn't a podcast. It was just two guys sitting around shooting the shit, which is which is to me the
Thank
most
you.
fun version of these things that you can do. Not take it,
That's my pull quote.
take it.
I will.
I'm just seeding gems across the field. And like I said, I'm happy to come back and do it again because I know we're a little truncated
Awesome.
today because of the schedule, but we're busy creative dudes, man. We gotta get our thing out there.
This new podcast model has changed my relationship with the episodes. No longer do I record 1 to 3 weeks out. These conversations are 1 to 3 months old when I sit down to edit them. As a result, they dwell in my subconscious and my faulty memory. There they become something different. No longer a fresh and exciting talk straight from the oven. Now they exist in the canon of my creative thinking and affect how I process my craft. Because 3 months ago, me thought about these things that emerged in the conversation. Now I've processed and internalized, and hearing how the guests and I chew on the subjects keeps them fresh in my mind as I edit. See, creativity is a magic trick. While I like to dig into the process here, it's clear that a writer like Ron doesn't question the origin of his gifts. Perhaps it's a way to maintain the magic, or that he no longer feels the need to look upstream. And I totally get it. The source of my curiosity isn't a why or where do you get your ideas from question, but more a way to ensure a better chance of success against my brain's wiring. While it giveth much, it will easily taketh away. Creators like Ron are an admirable kind. Pros who have the facility to channel their experiences into the work on demand. This effortlessness, I don't know how you wanted to call it, affords a clarity of intention and adjustment that elevates their craft. With 2 more episodes left, season 18 is winding down. Then it's back to scheduling and recording in the new year. If you have thoughts on this season or future seasons, I'd love to hear them. Message me on Instagram and Blue Sky or email me. My handle everywhere is jalexmorrissey, with an @ symbol at the beginning or a .com at the end. If you're feeling super extra generous, please write a review on Apple Podcasts and or recommend the podcast to others. I'd love for more people to tune in and be inspired. Next week, indie comic sensation Michelle Fife joins me. Thanks for listening.